I spent a lot of time on the beach and the ocean, and that really tuned me to the natural world in a particular way. And in my book, Coming to Peace, I actually talk about this question that was really born in me. I remember I was like about 4, and it was the sunset, and I was sitting on the beach, where you give me any chance I get. So I was there watching the water come back and forth, and this question just like was in my mind. Why is it so peaceful here in nature? And why is it so not peaceful with humans? Why, and how do we bridge that? How, further thinking along that line. But that one question was right there. And I really spent the rest of my life, I have spent the rest of my life trying to understand how to bring the harmony of nature, the power and the wisdom of nature into the affairs of humans.
Isa Gucciardi, welcome to Fear Unzipped. I am so delighted to have you here. I want to give a shout out to beautiful Beth Grossman for introducing us. I have been saying that a lot on the podcast lately. The people she has brought to me are of the highest intention, the highest frequency. I'm getting chills actually saying this to you. I'm just really happy to have you here. I want to let the viewers and listeners know a little bit about you. So here, I'm going to introduce that. You're an early pioneer in integrating modern psychology and ancient wisdom. I've said this so many times on the podcast. I think that's the perfect combination. Right now, it is the perfect combination. I think there's wisdom in both arenas, very much so. You created Depth Hypnosis, which gets to the root of suffering. And I'd like to talk a bit about that. And you wrote this book, Depth Hypnosis, and it was with other books as well. And I just finished Coming to Peace, and it talks about how to manage conflict among ourselves, with other people, but also internally in ourselves. And to me, that's really important, because if you don't manage that, then how do you manage everything else? So I really want to talk about that. I also noticed you called Depth Hypnosis Plant Medicine Slowed Down. So we're going to need to really dive into that one. And you lived in 11 countries and you speak 6 languages. And I find that very interesting. So Isa, welcome to Fear Unzipped. And we always start, or I like to start, with finding out about your background, because there has to be something in your background, your childhood, or something that triggered you to become who you are today. And those stories really resonate with listeners and viewers. So I'm going to toss it to you now.
Oh, well, the reason that I speak so many languages is because I moved around a lot as a child. I spent the larger part of my childhood in Hawaii, which is a very amazing and beautiful place in terms of the natural world. And I spent a lot of time outside. I spent a lot of time on the beach and the ocean. And that really tuned me to the natural world in a particular way. And in my book, Coming to Peace, I actually talk about this question that was really born in me. I remember I was like about 4, and it was the sunset, and I was sitting on the beach, where you give me any chance I get, I'm down at the sunset at the beach with the crabs, because when the sun goes down, the crabs come out, and I just love watching the crabs. So I was there watching the water come back and forth, and this question just like was in my mind. Why is it so peaceful here in nature. And why is it so not peaceful with humans? You know, and how do we bridge that? How, further thinking along that line. But that one question was right there. And I really spent the rest of my life, I have spent the rest of my life trying to understand how to bring the harmony of nature, the power and the wisdom of nature into the affairs of humans. And in a lot of ways, depth hypnosis is a process of aligning people with that wholeness that is integral to the experience of nature. And it's a process of breaking up obscurations that people have to that wholeness when they come in for help with things like addiction or depression or anxiety or PTSD. And that, the whole process is about helping dissolve those patterns that are creating the imbalance and helping people step into a stronger connection with their own internal guidance, which is often in the form of nature and their own, sense of knowing of that connection with the earth. So my child, I hit the ground running, like, here we are, we got work to do,
Well, I love that. And I also think in depth hypnosis and in all of this work we do, we often think it's something that's causing it, but we find out that it's actually something completely different. And that really came out in Coming to Peace, that you really, when you were working with groups of people, they thought it was one thing, but it was really, really a core thing from something completely different. And then when you expose that, then I think you can start healing.
Right.
You talk about you were in Mexico for a while and you were with, is it the Huichol people?
Yes.
Is that correct? Can you share a bit about that as well?
Well, I was in the north part of Mexico, northeast, in the Sierra Madre Mountains there. And I was living on a ranch with, and I was kind of, left, to be, cared for by the ranch hands. There was sort of my family kind of parked me there. And I was a bug in a rug there. I was so happy because the people were so gentle. It was, they taught, like they would put me on a horse and like slap the flank of the horse and say, ride. It wasn't exactly gentle, but they were teaching me how to ride horses. They were teaching me how to, find the right plant. I get stung by a bee, they would show me the plant that I need to, chew up and put on the bee sting, to make it stop hurting. They were so kind and they were really peaceful among themselves. And I think it was really a new thing for me to have the interactions be with each other, because we were on a ranch, everything had to do with the horses and the feed and the land. And, so we were living very much within, on a daily workaday life way within the bosom of the earth. And I think that was so informative to me. And, as you may know, or your listeners may know, I in addition to creating depth hypnosis, I've also created something called, and Coming to Peace, I've also created something called applied shamanism. And, and that particular experience with the Huichol people really brought me very close in on shamanic practices. I was exposed to what I wasn't exactly sure what it was at the time, but basically weather making and working closely with the elements to create change. And they did a lot of ceremony, and it just was the natural part of the world there. And I was just very lucky to be part of it. And it, I did witness these shamanic ceremonies, and I was absolutely compelled by them, and wanted to learn more. And when I was able to start my formal academic education, after having spent years reading every book I could find on Native American, there was in the library at one of the schools that I went to, there was a whole shelf on biographies of Native American chiefs, and I'm like, read it, and so I had spent a lot of time. I was an avid learner on my own, and I was always in a place where I was pretty much on my own a lot anyway. So I had to entertain myself with, and I did that with, seeking knowledge. So when I started my formal studies, I studied cultural and linguistic anthropology, which is basically a formal study of shamanic practice, and really, continued my quest. Where is the culture that reflects in a very clear way the peace of nature? I had found much of that with the Huichol people, but I really wanted to learn more about, are there other cultures that have managed to live at peace with the earth and with people within themselves? And of course, it is the indigenous people that have come close to that. Of course, not every indigenous group is peaceful, of course, but there is being informed by groups where people have not been overexposed to Western colonial nightmare. They still have their traditions, and being able to study those, and I really I was very much in awe of the way in which the ceremonies, the power that the ceremonies that people would do, when I was studying in the field, and looking at the way in which the movement of power from one place to another within shamanic practice really captured my understanding, and ignited my desire to understand. And so healing practices, there's a lot about work in shamanic practice that is not healing in nature, but I was really focused on, what's happening here to heal these people, because all the people I knew in my family and the expat community of wherever I might have been, those people were not happy. They were not happy. Right. And so, and I thought healing is going to help. If we can heal them, that will help them be happy. That was really what I was up to. Can't we be happier? And there's a tremendous amount in shamanic practice that we integrate into depth hypnosis and work directly with in applied shamanism that does really break down the tangles that people get into because they don't understand the consequences of their actions, and because they're confused about the nature of themselves and their relationship to reality.
So that it all makes so much sense. Isa, I have a master's in cultural anthropology, and all my life, and folklore, and all my life, I have been drawn to indigenous communities. I'm from when I was very, very, very little. And of course, I wasn't aware of why, but I can look back now, and the connection to nature, that the honoring, the respect. I look at a leaf as being just as important as a human, which you'll understand that, but we're all part of this planet. And I talk to rocks all the time. I talk to my trees. They actually talk back. My rocks do talk back. One gave me incredible information the other day. That was very, very helpful. So I understand this path. You took it, of course, much further than I did, but I think this podcast is my way of giving back, this sharing this beautiful way of living with our surrounding areas and our fellow human beings. So I'm curious about your family and your parents and what that was like and why you traveled to all these different places. Was it a fun environment that you were in, or was it a bit was it riddled with conflict? Or I'm just curious.
Well, it was nothing but conflict. The reason that we were moving around is because I didn't know. I had no idea. My father, and I did not find this out until after my father had died. He was a CIA employee, and so we were moving around to these different places. We also lived in Saudi Arabia and Lebanon, and different parts of Europe, and so that was why we were moving. And he was often gone, and my mother wasn't a happy person, and my brother was a very dangerous person, and so I'm out looking around, seeing what else is going on. Where else can I be besides here?
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, Isa, my father was also, I found out later that he was in the CIA.
That's right. I think that's why that introduced us, right?
Yes. And my dad was the most beautiful soul. He was just such an incredible man. My mother was a beautiful person. We lived in Turkey. We lived in Korea. We were traveling the world. And then my dad was gone a lot. And he wrote there were three of us girls. He wrote each of us a letter every single day, including my mother, when he was gone. He was just a beautiful soul, but he too was, you'd never know it. You would never have known it. But
when did you find out that he was in the CIA?
Well, I got a little hint when I went to college, and my dad asked me to meet with a friend of his who was the FBI director down where I was. And this man told me, I said, oh, no, my dad is an attorney. He's not, no, you have it wrong. You're confused. He goes, no, your dad, it's with the CIA. And then, it started fitting together, but my dad never told me, and he never would.
Oh, wow.
So.
And you never asked him? You never asked him after you heard?
I'd ask him and he'd laugh. Oh. He had this beautiful laugh, and he'd laugh and go, oh. He was just one of the best people that I've ever met. So, but that's an interesting, we have some things in common that is really fascinating to me with the anthropology and our dads.
Amazing. It's amazing how much we have in common.
It really is. And we've lived very different lives, but we have a lot in common. And I do think that we both really treasure the elements and, what's around us as being very nurturing and loving. And healing, very, very healing. Can you share with us some of coming to peace, some of the practices that that maybe listeners and viewers could incorporate as well? There were so many incredible things. I remember the gentleman, what's his name? I actually, Joel. He had the red ball in the soldier.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about this and what we can do to better ourselves?
Sure. Well, so maybe I'll just talk about that case study a little bit.
Sure.
Because that'll illustrate both it'll illustrate the point of how internal conflict drives external conflict. And the book, the subtitle of the book is Resolving Conflict with Others and Within Ourselves. And so coming to peace is like a mediation process. It's a counseling process where that we work within Depth Hypnosis for families and couples and communities. And it's based on a set of principles or sets of principles that are drawn from different Indigenous peacemaking traditions as well as Buddhism. And those traditions include Ubuntu from Southern Africa. And a lot of people may know about Ubuntu because it was the heart of the truth and reconciliation process in South Africa after apartheid was dismantled, and when people were trying to, come to some kind of sense of justice for all of the ways in which the people of color had been harmed, and in an effort to have the people who were harming the colonizers, have them be able to have the opportunity to take responsibility for what they had done. And then also, it also draws from Ho'oponopono, which is a Polynesian form of peacemaking that is based on forgiveness. And then it's also drawn from the Iroquois methods, or the Algonquin League methods of peacemaking, which is the Iroquois League is a very interesting study of peacemaking, which the League was formed in the late 1600s, maybe late 1600s, maybe late 1500s, and on the eastern seaboard of North America. And there are 6 different indigenous groups that became part of this league of peacemaking, because there had been this destruction because of all of the blood feuds, and they really came together to create, articles of understanding, rules of comportment, just ways of making peace, and so it's drawn primarily from those 3 traditions, and Buddhism contributes this idea of personal responsibility and compassion in the work of resolving conflict. And one thing that I always start with, I have sat with so many people in conflict. It's interesting. You're asking about my childhood. There's so much conflict in my childhood, and in my professional life, there's so much conflict. But the wonderful thing is, I have something that I can do about it. With these methods of coming to peace and depth hypnosis. So basically, when you're working to resolve conflict, you have these particular sets of rules. One is everyone's experience is considered as equal to everyone else's, which is really important because a lot of conflict remains in place because there are hierarchies, and the people at the top of the hierarchy are the ones calling the shots, and they're the ones often creating conflict within others who don't want to be treated in the way that they're being treated. And so by the fact that the person in charge is calling the shots. So everything becomes equal. Everyone is equal. Everyone's voice is considered to be as important as everyone else's. There's the other rules are, you're not allowed to interrupt anyone. And in fact, there's a talking stick or some other object that goes around the circle or between 2 people. And only the person who has that object can speak. And so this really cuts down on the ways in which, Westerners fight. If you've ever heard Parliament, everybody's just trying to outshout each other on the floor, and there's no outshouting anyone, and if you do speak out of turn, you're asked to have a timeout. It's very strongly enforced. And then everyone talks about their truth of what's going on, as to open, and then it goes on from there. Everyone responding to the other person's perception of what's going on, and it's very much that the facilitator is very pulled back and only puts in a question or brings in a perspective to ask people to consider. And usually people come to their own resolution with this process, with this container. Mm-hmm. It's understood that everyone is working with their own inner guidance. There's a process of connecting people with their inner guidance so that they are working with their best and highest self as they're coming to the table. There's also this idea that you would strive to tell the truth as you know it. And, it's not stated, lying's not allowed, but truth is emphasized. And, personal responsibility. I have a, the list of suggestions of how to bring yourself into the circle, and taking personal responsibility and helping people understand that taking personal responsibility doesn't mean they're going to be blamed. It means that they are going to understand better how they might have contributed to this conflict. So that's the container that is brought into any conflict. And the particular container that I outline, the particular conflict that I outline in the one of the first case studies I present, was a conflict between a family, a stepfather, a mother, and her 3 daughters. And they had, the stepfather was trying really hard to, be the dad, and the father was kind of a ne'er-do-well, and, dropped out, was always dropped out, never showed up. And so he was trying to compensate for that. And he had a really intense conflict with one of the girls who, they just were fighting all the time. And they couldn't even sit down at the dinner table and pass the salt without there being some conflict. So they came in, to work together. And so we went around, in the way that I just described, and each person described their experience of the conflict. And one of the things that became one of the issue that the young girl had was that he was too much in her face, that he was coaching their volleyball team, and he was, he was always trying to show her the next thing that she could do, or, try to help her. And she was just like, back off. And he was like, oh, I was just trying to help. And then she goes, well, you're not my dad. And, and he says, well, I'm trying to make up for the fact that you don't have a dad anymore, who doesn't show up for you. And, the other members of the circle, the other girls will say, well, you're not our dad. And another one said, well, he doesn't show up. It's true. And so they're all kind of beginning to grapple with the fact that everyone is actually in response to the absence of the father, and the way in which the father wasn't showing up. And Joel, the stepfather, was trying too hard to make it happen. And there was a moment in the circle where, when the younger girl said, well, you can't make it up. There's no way to make it up. You can't be our father, and as much as you might want to, you can't be. And that really kind of everyone kind of broke down at that moment. And he was like, I guess I just want to be, there for you. And then one of the girl who had the big issue with him said, I think I'm just angry at my father. And Joel said, I think I'm really angry at him too. And everyone realized that it was the anger at the father's delinquency that was driving the conflict. And that was, and then everyone realized, that everyone was doing their best. And there was this beautiful, beautiful piece that came out of that. And Joel took it further, because again, external conflict is driven by internal conflict. Mm-hmm. And so he wanted to know what the internal conflict was within him that was driving this. And so we did a process. So when you're doing, I just described external coming to peace, the more traditional form of peacemaking. And now I'm going to describe internal coming to peace, which is all of the same parameters. But then what you're doing is you're working with parts of the self that are in conflict and that are driving external actions. And the way that you become aware of these parts of the self is through, again, connecting with inner guidance, and then asking help with that inner guidance to tease out and make more concrete the different parts that are at play. And in this case, Joel had recognized that his sense of over-responsibility was what was driving him to act inappropriately in the eyes of his stepdaughter. And so he wanted to look at the issue of responsibility. So, and he was very, he was very split around it. Like, I want to be responsible. I want to do this, but I want to help, but it doesn't seem like it's helping. Why isn't it helping? So we teased out these two parts of the self. One, which was very much, I have to take responsibility. If we don't take responsibility, bad things are going to happen. And this other part that was in resistance, like, you need to chill, like, we don't need to take responsibility for all of this. And they had a conversation back and forth wherein, and the part that was so much wanting to take responsibility to make things better was able to listen for the first time to this other part that it had always experienced as this lazy part of himself, or this part that wasn't willing to give it 100%, which drove him to take more responsibility. And he was able to see that this part of himself was actually trying to protect him from draining all of his energy in situations where he shouldn't be, draining his energy, taking responsibility for things that he wasn't responsible for. And so that was like a real aha moment for the part that was over responsible to realize, you mean I'm not responsible for all these things? And I remember one of the main points that the part that was trying to keep him on a leash a little bit was, that point of that part was, you're not taking responsibility for yourself. You're taking responsibility for all these other things, but you still smoke, you don't exercise, your diet is, crap, you're like, you're not, like, you want to take care of something, take care of us, and take responsibility for us, for our well-being, and that was like a really big shift. And, that changed a lot within him. And what that did, so he had a lot of internal learning that came from that, a huge internal way of being with him, a change in a way of being with himself and caring for himself, and a shift in the way that he related to other people's issues, which then translated into a much more harmonious set of interactions with his family.
It's incredible. This group got together. They're thinking it's Ashley. I think her name was Ashley and Joel, or the names he used in the book. And they think it's a conflict between the two of them. It's actually about their dad, their biological dad. They're all angry at the biological dad. And this is the beauty of this kind of therapy and healing. The other thing that I loved, so that's when I said the red ball and the soldier. So
those are the two parts. Yeah.
Yes, can you explain? So it seems like when everybody comes in, each person, they have something that they, how would you call that? That is their grounding source or something?
Their inner guidance.
Their inner guidance.
And in depth hypnosis, we talk about this part of the self as the part of the self that has only your highest good as its sole intent. And you connect in depth hypnosis, one-on-one work and in couples work, it doesn't matter, but whether you're working with one person, two people, three people, four people, the first piece of work that you do after you understand what the presenting problem is and get a little bit of history about the presenting problem is you do a piece of altered state work, which is like a guided meditation in that you are looking internally to connect with a part of yourself that has only your highest good as its sole intent. But it's not a guided meditation. And most guided meditations will tell you, okay, now you go down this path and now you're in the woods and now now you look into the trees and you see something there. And what are you seeing there? Oh, you're seeing a bird. It's very, very directive. But with depth hypnosis, you're guided, you're helped to go into an altered state of awareness, so that your mind can, your conscious mind, which usually blocks any kind of disorganizing principle, is able to relax and recognize that this process is an organizing principle, and then you're able to connect with this part of the self that has only your highest good as its sole intent by broadening your perspective and deepening your perspective within yourself. And people will experience this part of the self in their own way. Some people may experience it as a light, or as a sound, or as a mythic or angelic being, or a person, or a plant, or an animal. And it's very unique to them. And once they connect through this meditative process, guided process, then they, affirm their connection with this part of the self. And people may, think, oh, I'm just imagining this, or this is outside of me, or this is within me. It doesn't matter how people are getting to understanding what this is. The main thing is that connecting with this field of power that has wisdom and compassion, and that they can have access to. And that is very grounding, because you can't really do any of the further work in depth hypnosis or coming to peace without that ground, because we are almost always working in a field of difficulty, where people are having a hard time. And so you want to be able to bring that power of that part of the self to bear on all the processes that we work with beyond that. And do you want me to keep going and talk about
Yes, I think it's absolutely fascinating. I do something similar every time I start an interview or a conversation. I don't call it an interview, a conversation with somebody. I bring in a gatekeeper. I make sure only frequencies of love or higher can come through. I create a bubble around myself, my guest, and the audience, that it's a healing space. I mean, it's very real. This is not fiction in my mind. I can actually physically see it. So when people come into it and they listen to it, it's like somebody has their arms around them. I'm never going to put them in fear in this space. We're scared already. We're all scared already. So I do that. So I loved that each person came into the practice with this, and I'm getting chills saying this, with something that makes them feel grounded and protected and safe. Because talking about conflict or being in conflict does not feel safe. And when we don't feel safe, we can lash out. We act out, because I think we all just want to be safe, be loved and be safe. But please continue. And then like the red ball and the soldier were his, what was that for Joel?
Those were two parts. So you have this base, this base of this inner guidance that might appear in any way to you. But then when you're doing the parts work, you're in an altered state, where a process, again, you've connected with that part of the self that has only the highest good. And you basically feel it's a very somatic process. Both depth hypnosis and coming to peace are the somatic is the word that people often use, or embodied, because you are locating, when you're looking for the parts of the self that are in conflict, you identify them through a conversation. And, with Joel, he realized there was this part of himself that was just really over responsible. And he was less aware of this part that was like holding him back. And he really did, in his own mind, he saw this part that he thought it was lazy and irresponsible. And so so there were these two parts whenever he was approaching any kind of issue. So we helped him go into an altered state of awareness with suggestions for relaxation, and then connecting with that inner guidance, and then asking him to do a body scan to locate where in his body that part that feels like it has to take responsibility for everything resides. And usually there's some kind of, well, always there's some kind of physical sensation. And then you have the person breathe into that physical sensation, and the direction is there any color or temperature here in this? Say it's a tightening in the stomach. Is there any color or temperature as you breathe into this tightening in the stomach? So, and, in this case, it was red. Is there any form that it takes? It's taking the form of a ball. So then you've reified this experience that he was barely aware of. That he was very aware of. But then, the red ball was the part that he was less aware of. Yeah. So, he's reified this. It's a red ball, okay? And so that, I'm sorry, I'm confusing this because it's already confusing when you're first coming into contact with it. So the direction where is the part, when we asked where is the part where you're hyper responsible, he found that in another part of his body and breathed into it, and that was the policeman. So
I was a policeman. I thought a soldier. I thought it was a soldier.
Yeah, it was some military. Yeah,
but it makes sense. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, regimented. You follow the rules. You make sure everything's organized. You're in command.
Exactly.
Nobody can fall in your, under your guidance.
Yes. And he was, there's a lot of, one of the things that you have to remember, and both of the parts saw this, and something that I saw as a facilitator from the very beginning, because I'm not in the middle of it, that the soldier had a lot of honor and really wanted to do good. And the red ball was also, very concerned about well-being, but they were, and that's the thing. They're both trying to make things better. Like you said, they're both trying to make things better, but they have their own way of doing it. And so that gets into conflict. So that's between parts of the self. And you find that a lot with couples and families where different people have different ideas about what's the best thing to do. And everybody is trying to get, as you say, to that place of safety and that place of no fear, and everyone, as you say, people are scared. People walking around are scared. It's very scary being alive right now. And so everyone's in reaction to that fear. And that's a lot of what drives conflict.
It's very scary being alive right now. And it's also exquisite because of practices that when we can dive into ourselves and really find the core of what's making us crazy and unsettled, ungrounded, once you find that there is a beauty, because we came into this world fully loaded and just beautiful beings. And then, all the other stuff comes upon us and we have to deal. And one of my guests calls this is a learning lab. We're on the earth. It's a learning lab to get us to love. That what we're supposed to learn here is love. And I really, really do believe that. You also talk about ignored experiences and how dangerous that is when you allow that to just fester inside of you.
Yeah, this is something, when someone comes in, I'll give you an example of that if you want, from a depth hypnosis session. Would that be helpful to talk about?
Extremely helpful.
So in depth hypnosis, we understand that the symptom that the person is coming in to help with is the tip of the iceberg of something else, and that the symptoms are actually the teacher. And if you can set up a process, which we do in depth hypnosis, of understanding how to follow what that teacher is trying to show, then you can get to the bottom of the actual driver of the presenting symptom. And so in this case, this woman she didn't want to quit smoking. Her whole family wanted her to quit smoking. And she was only there. She had a lot of attitude, she's like, okay, I'm doing this, but she did it. She went along with it. So we took the biography of the presenting problem, which was she was smoking, and how long had she been smoking? She'd been smoking since she was a young teenager, and what the and so that we learned about her smoking. So we did the process of connecting with that part of the self that has only the highest good as its sole intent in the first session. And I think she connected with an angel. And so that was good. And in the next session, one of the things that you can do with addiction and depth hypnosis, one of the best things that you can do to try to get at what is at the heart of an addiction is to ask the question, what would happen if you couldn't smoke, for instance? Mm-hmm. And then everything comes up, like all of the drivers for it. And she said, I would get really anxious. I really need to be able to smoke. And I said, well, why is that? She goes, because when I smoke, everybody stays away from me. I get a break. She had a lot of kids, like I can go out and I can sit outside on the steps and I can smoke. Nobody bothers me. There's nothing I have to do. It's like my happy place, that's, and if I didn't have my happy place of smoking, I would be really anxious. And I'm like, okay. So what we do in depth hypnosis is we follow a strong emotion. Again, we go into an altered state of awareness that's induced with suggestions for looking inward and connecting with your guide. So you've got your guide, the part of the self that has only your highest good as its sole intent that's there. You've connected with it. So even though we're going into this anxiety, there is this place of safety right there. So we located the anxiety in her body. We did that same process of breathing into it to see where color it might have, what shape, what temperature. And I think I'm not sure, I think it was like a cold blue strain that she found. And so then we give suggestions, allowing yourself to follow this cold blue stream and allow it, or this sensation, whatever it is. And we do a count. Let it take you to the situation, time, or place where you are first or most significantly feeling this cold blueness in your system. And we followed it, and she wound up, she was in her neighbor's garage, and she was about 8 or 9. And the neighbor's father was molesting her and her friend. And she didn't know what to do because he played with them and stuff. And she was like totally confused by it and upset by it. And she, we went ahead, we have a process of, in that situation, we would bring in the adult self and the guide and do what in shamanic practice is called a soul retrieval, to bring back that part of the self that's been stuck in the trauma. And so we bring back that part of the self, that little girl who's there. She shifts her relationship to that experience through the perspective offered by the guide and the mother. She is taken out of that situation, but not the mother, the adult self, taken out of that situation and brought into her own heart. And then there's a repatterning with suggestion hypnosis after that. So when at the end of that session, she was like, I totally forgot that. I totally did not remember that. That is something that I haven't thought about. I had no idea that this was happening, that this and driving my smoking, right? So it was at that point when she realized that she was smoking, she was trying to manage all of that confusion and anxiety and not knowing what to do, and just needing a break. She was using the smoking to try to get her a sense of space around her internal disorganization. And when she realized that, she was actively more interested in quitting smoking. And we did many more processes like that, because that was not a one-time thing. Mm-hmm. And she on her own terms, on her own time, she's the one who decided to do the abstinence piece. When you're breaking addiction, you have to have an abstinence piece. But she decided on her own terms, that she was going to stop for 21 days and see how she felt. Wow. And we did a lot of work during that time, and she did quit smoking.
So she was smoking so nobody would be around her,
right?
Which is so interesting. It's a protective mechanism because nobody can hurt me while I'm smoking. Yeah. And who would have ever thought that smoking a cigarette would attach to molestation when she was a child? It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant work you're doing. And we all have this inside of us. We all have these hidden memories that I always look at it like a foundation that we put more cement on, and it's hidden inside of us, and then we'll lash out at somebody, but it has nothing to do with that person.
Right.
It has everything to do with a trigger or a memory this work, it's so important. And the fact that you're putting it in a clinical situation, bringing in this ancient wisdom and the modern psychology, it's just very admirable. I really have a lot of respect for what you do, and listening to you. And I like to listen to your book because your voice, Isa, is so soothing and so calming and nurturing, and it makes a person feel really safe. It's a superpower you have that you may not know it, but that's very important. So I love listening to it. I would hike. I hike a lot. I live part-time in California. I would hike a lot, and I'd be listening to you and stopping to take notes, the notes of my iPhone. And
thank you.
But yeah, it's really interesting. One other thing that you brought up is forgiving, and it is important for us to forgive, but it's not helpful for us to forgive quickly. And I'd like you to share that, because we always hear, just forgive. It's not for the other person. It's for yourself. It's for yourself. But will you explain about forgiving quickly and maybe give an example about that?
Sure. So, forgiveness is for yourself. That is true. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we try to do is in order to get back to peace, in order to get back to stasis, we will often overlook the effect that someone else's trespass has had upon us. Mm-hmm. And we will often abandon a part of ourself that is hurt in order to be able to remain in relationship with someone, or in order to maintain a relationship with someone. And the truth is, there is a lot when someone has done something that has been a trespass, that where they have truly betrayed you in some way. It's really important to understand the pain of that betrayal, and to understand the trespass as a betrayal. Where something, you can have a wide range, like a spectrum of different types of trespass, and with a more simple kind of trespass, like, you didn't show up for our meeting, and you promised that you would, and the other person says, I know I didn't show up. I got totally engrossed in something else, and I completely forgot, and I'm really sorry, and it won't happen again. Something like that. That's like, okay, all right, I can forgive you for that, but you took responsibility. We can forgive, we can move on, like that's one level, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of trespasses that happen in relationships that are much more complex than that. And, for instance, I'm working with a couple right now where, he's decided that he wants to be in a relationship with someone else, mm-hmm. and with his wife at the same time. and that he can't understand why she can't get that and why she can't just get over the fact that he didn't tell her about that right away. And he's, his position is, well, you should just be, if you love me, you'll forgive me and you'll embrace this woman because you love me, right? This is like crazy making time. Right. So, and she's like trying to go along with it. Okay, well, maybe I should forgive. Maybe I'm not being a good person if I can't forgive. Like I want him to. It is true. I want him to be happy. But and she's like totally forgetting her own well-being in an effort to try to make peace in the situation where it is just rampant with betrayal on every level, and so the work that I'm trying to do with her is to have her actually become aware of what her actual needs are and what happens to her needs when she tries to forgive him for all of the different layers, for not having told her they were sleeping together in their house, and all the ways in which she's trying to talk herself down. Well, I should be able to embrace. Oh, sure. She's been trained, unfortunately, and clearly in the relationship that, giving up her needs is the best thing to do in order to keep peace. And in her life, that was always the thing. Like if she could give up her needs, then everything would be okay. So coming back, the way to help her get through this situation and is to help her come back to her needs and help her understand. And you don't want to like rub people's noses in this, but they have to look at this to take responsibility for it. All of the ways in which she has betrayed herself by not standing at her needs, and do all of the inner work of making amends between the part of her that did the betrayal, which is coming to peace, the part of her that did the betrayal and her needs that were betrayed. And so there's all of this work internally that needs to be done, that she needs to come to peace within herself so that she can have a coherent way of meeting this external betrayal. And this right there, let's take a picture right here. Remember, I said internal conflict drives external conflict. Mm-hmm. Internal relationship between parts of the self drives the type of relationships that we engage with externally. If she didn't have these two parts of the self that were engaged in this betrayal, she would not have chosen to be with someone ultimately who was going to betray her in that way. Because what happens is when you have these two parts that are in this process, in this case of betrayal, there's one part that's betraying and the other part that's betrayed. What will happen with relationships is that people will enter into relationships with people where they will project one part of that internal part onto the other person, and they will play the other part. So he's playing the betrayer, and she's playing the betrayed in the external relationship. But that process of betrayal is something that needs to be addressed within her, and that takes time. And if she just tried to get over and push over her responses, that any relationship that would go forward from there would be a relationship built on broken glass. Yeah. And she would have to continue betraying herself and deepening that sense of broken glass within herself, which is not good for your health on any level. And so she has to do this internal repair, and that takes time, and you can't rush it. You can't say, oh, sure, it's okay. It's okay for the kids. I want to make for the kids. No. You have to do the work. And ultimately, I'm hoping that the resolution here is that she does that internal work of healing that internal betrayal, and decides that she no longer wants to be in relationships where she's required to betray herself, which is a lot of relationships in her life. And so that will change. I mean, he's the sort of the biggest manifestation of it. But in this case, conflict is the teacher. And what I always say is the path to peace is through conflict. Through this conflict that she's having externally in this external relationship, in order to be able to come to peace with it, she has to follow its roots within herself and resolve the conflict within herself. And that's the most important thing. The external relationship is secondary, but she has to be able to get to that place where the part of her that's been betrayed is able to forgive. And there are, there's a lot of work to do there. There's parts of her that are very, very angry at having been betrayed. But ultimately, she is going to become a much more whole individual by doing this work. And it's from the external conflict that it got flagged. And it's so deep within her. It would have been so hard to get at without having this like flagrant manifestation betrayal.
It's so interesting because we all of us have this kind of two things inside of us that are kind of fighting each other. And so if you keep one external, you can never resolve what's inside you. Exactly. So you have to look at the two, like he looked at Joel looked at the red rubber ball or the red ball and the soldier. What a great way to bring tangibility to something that's intangible.
Yes, that reification of the parts is a key, and seating them and helping the person see that they are seated within the self, within the body. Yeah. They all of our experience is in the body.
Yeah. I just want to work with you. I think you're brilliant. I do. I love the work you're doing. It for some reason just really resonates with me. We have flown through this, which is crazy pants, but we have. And I have questions that I ask everybody. So can I ask you these questions?
Sure.
Okay. What is your number one go-to strategy to relieve your own mental distress?
Meditation and connecting with nature.
Mm-hmm. Me too. What is one of the best pieces of advice that you've received in life, personally or professionally?
I was thinking about it the other day. I remember when I was about 3 years old, my teacher, I must have been 4, I was in kindergarten, my teacher said to me, she said, now listen, whenever you're carrying scissors or whenever you're carrying a pencil, you always want to make sure that the point is downward. And I have done that every time I have carried scissors or pencils my whole life. And I was going down the stairs the other day holding a pencil, and I was holding it down and I slipped. And I was like, I was fine. I didn't hurt myself. But if I had that pencil with a point up, I might have stuck it in me. So that's like the best piece of advice I ever got.
It's so funny because we all heard it. I mean, I heard that. So there's no way that I could walk with a pair of scissors with the scissor part up. It has to be, my hands are around the blades.
Right?
Always.
It's so funny.
It's ingrained. See how things can get ingrained. I mean, good things and negative things
Right.
can get ingrained the same way. What does a successful life look like to you?
One where for me, I mean, and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but for me, a successful life is one where you are striving to come to peace within yourself and trying to bring peace to everything around you. I mean, that is a successful life, trying to, be as kind as you can to yourself and be as kind as you can to other people.
I've always said if you're at peace, then that means everything else is working.
Right. That's really true.
So that when I think that's what I say a successful life is, because I could have I could be a billionaire, but if I'm not at peace, then what's the point? And there's so many that aren't. So
I know. And
yeah,
and there's so many ways to come to peace,
So many ways. So that's my mantra. It's just, I want to feel peace. I want to feel grounded. I want to feel safe. And I want to feel joy. I want to have joy. Okay. Last one. Complete this sentence. In the past I was, and now I am.
In the past, I was unaware of the nature of reality and the nature of myself. And now I'm a little bit more aware of the nature of reality and of myself.
Because it's always a learning process, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're never fully cooked.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true.
Which I actually love. It's like going to the gym. I'm not going to go to the gym and go, oh, perfect, it's done.
Wouldn't that be great? Can we, I'd be okay with that one.
Well, the funny thing is, I said to some friends, I see men that can do that. They'll go, oh, I look fantastic. And they look in the mirror and I'll just go, wow, wish I had that. That's cool. Is there any parting message that you would like to leave with the audience?
Well, I just want to, the main thing that I want to say is how grateful I am to you for the work that you're doing in the world. And, just so appreciating your intention, your desire to bring forward wisdom that can help people. And I think that's such a noble aspiration and a noble engagement that you are working with in the world. And I think it's a beautiful example to all of us. And I just want to thank you for that.
You went right to my heart on that one. So thank you for that. Where can people find you?
Everywhere. No, I have to tell you a quick joke. Sorry, I know we're out of time.
That's fine.
A lot of my students say that I wind up in their dreams. Mm-hmm. And so you find me in your dreams. But one, just helping, just usually acting as a helper. But it just reminded me of this one of my actually colleagues and students. He told me he had this dream, and he said that he was in his garden and he noticed that there was kind of this rustling going on in the hedges, and he was trying to figure out what it was, and I peeked my head up over the hedge. So you can find me in your hedge. No,
I love that. I love that.
I just one more thing to that. I am a big gardener. Like, I'm all about plants and gardening. Just so the fact that I'm in the hedge is like totally makes sense.
It's now I think you're going to probably be in my dreams, because I'm going to be having conversation with a dream psychologist. And she said, keep a dream journal. And I've been doing that, and it's unbelievable what's happened. And she came into my dream. It's just so fascinating. We will also put in the show notes all the links and ways people can reach you, and links to your books and all the good stuff.
Yeah, sacredstream.org, isagucciardi.org, depthhypnosis.org, or maybe .com.
We'll have
shamanism.com. Yeah,
we'll have
lots of places. Yeah.
We'll have it all in there. And this is where I also tell the audience that if they do like the podcast and they're enjoying what they're hearing, to please subscribe, give us 5 stars, do all the things, to keep it going. I very, very much appreciate my community. I love my community very, very, very much. And with that, Isa, it has been my honor and delight to have you here. You just have no idea.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And it's been such a pleasure. It's so fun to meet someone who's got so many parallels.
Similarities. I know. Isn't that crazy?
Wow. Yeah, anyway. All hail Beth.
Yeah, all hail. And Beth, lover. Sending you so much love. Mwah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Much more later.
Okay.